My name is Lieutenant Aldo Rain, and I'm putting together a special team, and I need me 8 soldiers. 8 soldiers. Now, y'all might have heard rumors about the Armada happening soon. Well, we'll be leaving a little earlier. We're gonna be dropped into France, dressed as civilians. Once we're in enemy territory, as a bushwhacking guerrilla army, we're gonna be doing one thing, and one thing only.
Welcome to the Objective Secure podcast. My name's Mike.
Hi, I'm Emma.
This is episode 42, Big Yellow Bus, and how not to get thrown under it.
Or how to take one for the team.
No, we've had an episode called Taking One for the Team, so we can't call it that.
No, I know. I'm saying how not to get thrown under it or how to get thrown under it, but do it for the better, the greater good.
Okay, fair enough. Well, we're going to be talking team events.
And hopefully at some point when we get talking, we'll get on the same wavelength and we'll be all good.
We're going to be talking team events. We've just had the Australian New Zealand Team Championships.
Are they championships or challenge?
I'm going with championships because Diffie told me off on the live stream on the weekend while I was commentating two of the games. So it's the
you said challenge.
ANZTC.
No, it's the ATC.
No, it's the ANZTC.
I believe it's the ATC.
Well, the American one's the ATC.
For ANZTC.
Yes. Anyway,
should we start this again?
We're going to be talking team episodes today. Team events today.
Yeah, not team episodes.
No,
this is as close as we get to a team episode, and clearly we can't organise this.
We've actually covered a few bits and pieces over the last couple of years around the team events.
We have.
And if you head to the objectivesecured.com.au website, in the search bar, type in team, it comes up with about a dozen different things that I've either written or we've recorded.
Oh, does it?
Or the stats that you did for last year's event, which we'll talk about when we get to the main topic.
Mm-hmm.
About team events, and the episode 16, which we published just over a year ago now, talks about the WATC and a few other bits and pieces that we've done as well. So, but if you caught our live Facebook stream about a week ago, so around the 15th of May it would have been, we were talking to Chad, who's over in Tennessee in the United States of America, and he's a big supporter of OBSEC and the Australians getting involved in the American Team Championships. So with the ANZTC just gone, the ETC, the European Team Championships, around the corner, and the ATC around the corner, and WATC not far behind that. There's some really good team events. And there's also a couple on the east coast of Australia that they do team events for as well. There's a bunch of them around the world now, which is awesome. So we thought it was a good chance to start talking about some of the experiences we've had hosting one of these events, of attending these events, and some of the tricky bits and pieces that go along with putting a team together. Now, we're not going to necessarily be talking about army selections and that sort of thing, although that'll be a little bit of the conversation.
Yeah.
It's going to be about, putting the team together and some of the things you need to think about, and then talking about practice and those sorts of things. Before we get stuck into the topic, though, and I give too much away, we have to congratulate Queensland, who won the ANZTC on the weekend, beating WA, sadly, in the final round. Both teams on 4 wins.
I don't think Queensland thought it was sadly.
No, but I do. The heartbreaking thing for me was in 2016, we were in the exact same position while I was there as captain, where we went into the final round knowing that we had to beat Queensland, and a draw would have seen Queensland win, and that's exactly what they had again in 2019. So I will say the team this year probably, I'd have to go and look at the numbers, but I'm 90% sure they did better than we did this year compared to when I did it in 2016, because they actually won 4 of the 8 games. I think we only won 3 the year that we finished second.
Was there 8 games that weekend?
Yeah.
Okay.
8 games per round. So
All right, sorry.
I think they did better in terms of their win-loss ratio for the round, but the wins that Queensland got were all major significant scores, whereas the wins that WA got were lower scores, which meant that when you averaged it out of the 160 points available, Queensland tripped it over in 7 games with 1 game still to play. So, the congratulations have to go to Queensland. They played a fantastic event, narrowly beating WA in the final for first and second, and then Victoria snuck in third ahead of the Queensland mercenary team to round out the 8, which was fourth. I have to especially mention New Zealand because the boys put together a great team this year, and then had the shocker of shockers over the weekend when you actually go back and look at their results. They had this situation where they lost one round at 74 points, and at 75 points the round becomes a draw.
Oh.
So it is the best loss they could possibly have hoped for.
Oh, but still.
And they did it twice. So
I guess it takes skill, doesn't it?
So yeah, we had Queensland, WA, Victoria, the Mercenaries, New South Wales snuck in with 2 wins, then New Zealand, then the ACT, and then Team South Australia at the tail end.
Rounding out the 8.
So yeah, well done to all the teams and to all the players who attended. A special shout out has to go to Liam Hackett, who from the Normal Blokes podcast.
Mm-hmm.
Liam is, as far as I'm aware, only the second player ever to do a perfect 100 for the weekend. Last year we saw one of the WA mercenaries, Ben, who was playing for WA this year at this year's event, go perfect 100 for 100.
And did you check and make sure Liam didn't do 100 for 100 last year? Because I thought he had.
I can check it now while we're talking, so I will do that. But Liam went 100 for 100 this year. Eric Lathuris, who won CanCon and wins pretty much everything he puts his mind to. 97. Only dropped 3 points in one game,
was it one game or was it multiple?
Yep, and I think rounding out the top 3 players, Lockie Rigg, another WA boy, 92 out of 100. I think he only dropped those points in. I think his was from 2 separate games, whereas Eric's was 1 game. Down under pairings and down under network. Adam Camilleri 5 for 5, which was awesome. In 4th place for individual scores, 91 out of 100. And then David Teo from New South Wales, from his round point score, that's 4 wins and a draw, with a score of 90 out of 100, which actually means he went 20, 20, 20, 20, 10. So, and just very quickly to touch on Teo's list, which was an interesting list because there were plenty of people who saw it and went, what? It was a...
Have you gone into the main topic? We're still supposed to be in the
I'm
introduction.
just... So Teo was running a Primaris Captain, Librarian in Phobos Armor, 2 units of 10 Intercessors, 5 Infiltrators, an Ancient, 8 Reavers, 3 Inceptors with Plasma, 5 Hellblasters with Plasma Incinerators, Gilliman, and then an Execution Force of Assassins, so 1 of each of the 4 Assassins. So it looks to me like he bought Dark Vengeance and Shadow Spear, because that's where all those units come from, apart from the Reavers, I think is the only thing that you wouldn't have gotten from those 2 boxes. He's bought the Execution Force way back in the day when you got all 4 Assassins for $180, and then Gilliman. So it does really genuinely feel like a starter army, almost. And then for him to go 4 wins and a draw, scoring what he did, is nothing short of phenomenal. So...
But it just goes to show that exactly. You need to know the army and you need to know how to make it work. You can go out and buy the LVO winning army
and still lose.
If you don't know how to use it, you're not going to get great results.
Yep.
Whereas you can go out with your starter box and you can win events.
Oh yeah, and
so
look,
for new people who are coming into the hobby, I think that that's something to point out, that you don't have to go and drop all the money to buy, what the internet meta is telling you have to have. You can do it with box set armies if you know how to make them work.
Absolutely. And he did a fantastic job. So, congratulations to those guys. I'm just going to, while we've been chatting, I'm just going to bring up the players list to see. No, Liam last year did an 86. So Ben was the only player to hit 100 last year. So, congratulations to Queensland. to WA and to Victoria for rounding out the top 3. And I believe now their last thing to cover, which we haven't got any news of yet, is the bidding for 2020. Where and when that event will be. It should be around the same time, but where is anyone's guess. Obviously, it can't go back to Queensland. We could put a bid in for it for show for 2020 if we felt like it, because we've had a year break. I know there's a few people pushing to go to New Zealand for it at some point, but I could easily see it going back to New South Wales or to Victoria as well. So there's a few different options in the wing. So as soon as we know more, then we'll obviously start talking about that as well. That was the major event that we had over the weekend here in Australia. I don't believe there were any more. I know there were a couple that were hosted around the world over the weekend, but this was probably one of our bigger ones that took place over the weekend. 64 players. There was a New Zealand one called Battle of the Bay, which was 20 players on the weekend actually. So coming up from now, we've got Judgment Day in Victoria happening this weekend, and then we head straight into show the weekend after with the singles and the doubles, and Terracon is the week after that. So there's a bunch of very big events back to back to back coming through.
I can't see anything past Southern Hemisphere Open at this point in time.
If you head on over to downunderpairings.com and hit the tournaments, you don't even have to be logged in to do this, although the accounts are free. Generate an account, hit tournaments, and you can see all of the tournaments that are coming up. There's a little red box you can cross out, which is the active box, which will show you all the historic events for the calendar year as well, so you can see what's gone on in the past. But that covers a huge chunk of the Australian landscape in terms of events that are upcoming. You can also head on to Best Coast Pairings and have a look there if you're after something that is ITC related. Most of the ITC events in New South Wales go on that app. So events-wise, it's been a full-on weekend, and then we've got basically 4 weeks around the country here in Australia of full-on tournament after tournament after tournament. Speaking of show, we're still hoping our tournament trophies turn up. Crossing our fingers for those.
This is why I said don't say anything. We're just tempting fate.
No, we might as well. We're really excited. We actually got some cool trophies from Games Workshop this year for 40k and for Age of Sigmar that we haven't seen in Australia outside of, I think they gave them away at Mount Gravat's Heat rounds.
They did, yes.
But they haven't been to a non-Games Workshop event in what must be a decade.
Well, they haven't been to a Games Workshop event in a decade either.
So we've got
Mount Gravatt beat us by a month.
Yep. So we've got the Chainsword trophies and the Galmaraz trophies coming. Hopefully they get here.
Yeah.
Although I didn't realise this until recently, we have to spray paint them because they are.
We have to build them and spray paint them. Yes, we do.
The Chainswords.
Yes.
They come out. They're single piece. I've
They're
seen
not.
them. You have to mount them to the base, but they're single piece.
I was talking to Andrew from Mount Gravatt, who said that they're not single piece, and was giving me hints and tips on how to put them together.
Oh, okay. Because I've seen the hammer ones at the very least, which look to be single piece.
No.
So anyway, they come from Forge World, so we actually have to build and paint those. I knew we had to paint them. I didn't know we had to build them.
Yes, and he was saying anyway, it doesn't matter.
We don't know how many we're getting. We've requested a number.
Yeah.
And whether we get that number or not, I don't know, and that'll obviously determine who gets what trophies for what event.
Let's see what actually turns up.
Yep. Once we've got the tracking numbers and we know what's what, then we can figure that out.
If you haven't heard about Southern Hemisphere Open, you can have a look on the objectivesecure.com.au website and then have a look. It says Southern Hemisphere Open. Click into that. And
that takes you to the show website.
The show website. And basically under the What's On It Show tab, there's a whole heap of stuff there.
Yep. All the players packs, the painting workshops. Like the last 2 years, the ticket sales were sluggish until sort of 4 weeks out, and then they've been slowly increasing and ramping up each day with people going, oh, there's still tickets available? Yes, there are still tickets available. Go and buy them.
Yes, please buy them now.
It makes our lives so much easier and less stressful.
It definitely does. Yeah.
Other than that, though, look, if you've been following along the last couple of episodes that we've done of the podcast have been all about show. But but we're, like I say, we did a live on Wednesday last week, and we're chatting to Chad. I think Chad's name's Taylor.
It is Taylor.
Talking about the American Team Championships, and the idea was floated about getting some Aussies over to play, which was super exciting because they're getting a bigger venue for 2020. So we're going to explore some of the stuff we have to think about for attending that event in just a second when we come back from our quick break. Hi, I'm Mike.
Hi, I'm Emma.
And we are the team from Objective Secured.
We just wanted to take a minute to let you know what you can expect from our 3rd annual Southern Hemisphere Open this year at Claremont Showgrounds, June 1 to 3.
We've got tabletop games, tournaments, intro and demo games.
Yeah, we've got workshops, panels, role-playing games.
Board games, painting competitions.
If you want to find out more, you can follow us at objectivesecured.com.au or Objective Secured on Facebook, Twitter or Instagram.
Southern Hemisphere Open, 1, 2, 3 June, Claremont Showgrounds.
Happy gaming, everyone.
All right, so topic-wise today, we're going to be talking team events. And you'll have to bear with us because both of us have got the beginnings of a cold, so we sound a bit weird.
And our brains are well and truly dug into show, so I can talk to you a lot about narrative doubles or doubles events that are happening at Southern Hemisphere Open, but it's just we're pulling ourselves out of that to talk about team events.
Yep. So, like I said in the intro to this episode, if you head to the website and type in team, you'll find a whole bunch of things that pop up in the search results for our website. We've got a couple of them here. Firstly, you can listen to episode 16 of the podcast, which talks about the WATC for 2018 with 120 players and goes through some of that stuff that we dealt with last year. It also has a little yellow bus, which I will have to make sure goes in the show notes as well.
Mm-hmm.
And that kind of hints at some of the stuff we deal with. And then we've also got the ATC Team Championship Stats and Overview post that Emma did October last year, talking about some of the results from our hosting of the ANZTC and, how many games people played and when they finished and how many turns and a whole bunch of data that we're able to get out of Down Under Pairings, which is awesome information for us to have as TOs.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a few other ones there talking about some of the lists that we've seen over the years. And there's a post in there from 2015, which is no longer relevant, sadly, because I found it and went, oh, that's cool. And then realised that the ANZTC's format has changed since then, because that was for 7th edition, not 8th. So just to have a quick...
you've brought it up now because...
Well, I'm just getting to that to say, when you're going through it, please check the dates to make sure what you're reading is relevant to the current game system. So, team events. Like I mentioned in the intro, there are several that happen around the world.
Mm-hmm.
We have the ANZTC. We have the ETC, the European Team Championships, that happen each year and have been for a number of years now. I went in 2012 and they'd been going a few years prior to that. Yep. So that must be 10 years or more at this stage. The American Team Championships. I don't know when the ATC started. I'd have to ask Chad. We get him on post-event and post-show so we can talk to him about how the games and the event went. And then the WATC is entering its 4th year this year.
Wow.
Along with, like I said earlier, a host of them. I think Overwatch Gaming in Sydney is one that does team events throughout the year. I could be wrong there, but that's the name that's jumping into my memory at the moment.
Mm-hmm.
And all of these share some very similar things, but we'll talk about it from a TO's perspective first. About some of the things you have to think about that are different to a standard tournament when you're hosting a team event. And then we'll start talking about how to put a team together. So from a TO's perspective, the event differs significantly. And I think the format that we follow for WATC is pretty comparable to the ones that are followed around the world in that they tend to be pure generalship events. There's very little or no soft scores involved for sportsmanship or painting, although there are minimum standards and behaviours that are expected.
Mm-hmm.
And the events tend to be 2 days, tend to be standard size armies, and they generally follow one of two formats, in that they're either ITC Champions missions or they are the ETC complex rulebook missions that have been adapted over the years. So when you're going to these events, when you're going to run these events, I should say, you have to decide on the format.
Mm-hmm.
And how many, as bizarre as it sounds, how many players are on the team is probably something that you immediately have to consider. For the ETC, it's 8. For the ANZTC, it's 8. For the Americans, it's only 5. WATC is 6.
For our first year, did we do 4?
4, yeah.
Because I know for the AOS we did 4.
Yeah, it was 4 the first year we ran it.
The
format for that one specifically, yeah. Each of those numbers will give you different results in terms of, because the reason that those numbers change is to do with the matchup process.
Yep.
which is something that as a TO you really need to wrap your head around. And we did a video. It's on the YouTube channel for the matchups. It's a little bit out of date now, but the process is correct in that it's not a standard singles event where you're randomly paired, or you're paired using a Swiss system, or you're paired using a bracketed system. It works on the captains of each team managing that process to pick their players against opponents' players to give the team a result.
Yes. However, we still use the match system to pair teams.
Yeah. So for something like ANZTC, where there's only 8 teams, the day 1 was seeded based on the historic results of each team, and then day 2 was paired Swiss.
Mm-hmm.
So that the final round was actually the top 2 teams playing. I might have even been bracketed technically.
I was wondering if it was bracketed.
It must be bracketed, now I think about it. Whereas something like...
Do you want to just explain what the difference is between those two?
So the Swiss pairing is obviously trying to match off 1 plays 2, 3 plays 4, 5 plays 6, and so on in every round. Mm-hmm. Whereas bracketed separates you out so that the winners play winners from each round, but the number 1 winner plays the lowest winner each round, so that when you get to the final game, as long as you've got the right amount of teams, it becomes a knockout scenario where you should end up in the final round with 1 playing 2, having never met each other up until that point.
Yeah. So the downside to that is, so if you imagine, say we've got 10 teams, the first 6 teams all won.
We need 12 teams.
I'm just doing it for the sake of ease at the moment.
Well, you can't have 6 teams out of 10 win.
Oh, yeah, that doesn't work,
No.
does it? Okay, right. Okay, 6 out of 12. How's that?
Yep.
So the first 6 teams, they all won. Last 6 teams all lost.
Yep.
Okay. So team 1 would play team 6, team 2 plays team 5, team 3 plays team 4.
Yep.
And work it that way. And then team 7 plays team 12, team 8 plays team 11, that way. So I guess the downside to that is that you're not necessarily playing your strongest opponent the whole way through. So for team 6 and team 1, there's potentially a disparity between that. However, it does mean that when you get to the end, you are having team 1 and 2 playing. You're not getting to a point where team 2 was actually knocked out earlier.
Yeah, you can't submarine.
You
have to win every game. And it also means the people you're playing are winning every game.
Yes.
So, and it works, but it does really rely on that sort of knockout scenario where you have to have the right number of teams or players. And it's used in Underworlds in the format for Grand Clash. It's used in a few different game systems now. War Machine uses a version of it as well in terms of pairing up and down.
It gets tricky because if you don't have enough rounds to literally knock everyone out, then you do have to do a quick wiggle for your final.
So
which we'll have to remember for the Underworlds Grand Clash that we have at show.
Yes. So the way the systems work in the larger events, though, obviously you can do it as either pure Swiss or bracketed. My gut feeling is it's done Swiss because they don't have enough rounds to have and are out of bracketed.
Yeah.
The ATC in Tennessee has 50 teams of 5 this year.
Yes.
So breaking that down, 50 would go to 25, 25 would go to 13, 13 would go down to 7, 7 would go down to 4, 4 would go to 2, 2 would go to 1. You'd need like 9 rounds of play to get it down to a single winner. Yeah.
But what you can do is, say, for example, you got 5 rounds. You do your bracketed for your first 4 rounds. And then for your round 5, you go team 1 and 2 play off against each other.
Yeah, look, if you know that it's coming, you can prepare it that way, yeah.
Well, that's what we have to do for Grand Clash.
Depending on players, yeah.
Well, yeah, but I'm really aiming for lots of players.
So this is some of the sort of when you decide you're going to run an event, this is some of the stuff you do need to think about straight away is working out how many rounds, and the core stuff kind of still applies for the game system. And we'll use 40k as the example because it's the most prolific that we see in terms of team events. We could be wrong. There could be other ones.
Well, I guess it's the one that we focus on the most. So
well, ETC has 9th Age Warhammer. They did Flames of War the year I was there. I think they're still doing that now. There's talk of Age of Sigmar making an appearance there. There's also the World Team Championships for War Machine and Hordes.
Yes.
They're teams of 4, I think, or 5. So there are other formats that exist out there, but they all generally follow the same thing. You have to work out how many rounds, how many points, and so on, as if it was a singles event, but then have to allow extra time to do the matchup process, which most events allow between 15 and 30 minutes for that, depending on, obviously, the timing and scheduling they've got for the days. And then it's funny because you sort of figure that stuff out. You go, okay, we're going to have teams of... I wouldn't suggest anything lower than 5, personally, because the matchup process becomes largely irrelevant. Or, actually, that's not true. It becomes skewed in favour of one team.
Yes.
6 was a really good number that we've settled on for the WATC because it's aimed at the locals to come out in teams. 6 is a nice number where it's not too hard to get a team together and the matchup process still means a significant amount.
Yeah.
At 8, I think we'd actually struggle to get teams because it's... you're then having to sort of work outside people's own social gaming circles, potentially.
I think we perhaps would have to start with. In its 4th year, I think that we would be okay, but I know that people... they've got used to it being teams of 6, and so they're getting ready with teams of 6.
Yeah, absolutely. And then so you've decided on how many players you've got.
Having said that, the teams of 5 does still work with that same matchup process.
Yes, 5 does. 4's not relevant.
No,
it creates.
It does become skewed.
Basically the person who gets to go first in that process gets to pick 3 of the 4 games essentially, which is not what you want.
Although I suppose if you toss a coin. Still, we don't want that.
No. So, at that point, though, you can say, okay, we're going to run, like we've done this year, WATC is going to 2 days rather than 1. 6 games instead of, we've done traditionally 4 games in 1 day at a lower points value, which is just absolutely manic.
It is.
We've gone to 2 days, added 2 extra games, increased the points values, but we've now got 3 games a day, which... No, it's only 5 games, isn't it?
5 games, yeah.
5 games.
Now, just for TOs who, or perhaps if you haven't TO'd an event before and you're thinking about it, here's my little tip for you. The bigger the points values, the less work you have to do.
That is true.
It is so much easier on us when we do bigger points values games.
Longer times, I think, is the trick there. When we do... So WATC last year was 2-hour games with a 15-minute matchup process, and we fit 4 of those in last year.
It was a long day.
And as a player, I was playing last year with you TOing it, and as a player, you run off your feet. And I know from experience when we run First Blood, where it's 5 games in 1 day, you are just constantly chasing your tail as a TO.
What happens as a TO when you have these smaller games is that you don't actually get... There's no break.
No, there's no breather.
You get everyone started... And then you sort of manage to do 1 lap of the room because we've got to get started doing the painting competition. The painting judging. And then, which obviously isn't a factor for the team games, but for these ones it is. So we get started with that. And then we'll go, we've got an hour left.
Half an hour to go or whatever.
Have you done the warning? No. Okay, I'll go around and I'll give everyone a warning. So we do that. By the time you've gone around the whole room... You might get 1 more paint judging done, and then you got to go around to give everyone a half an hour warning. And so you're constantly counting down. Then you're like, okay, 5 minutes. You're doing things. I need your scores in. Get your scores in. What are you doing?
Next round, go, and you just do it again.
And so we literally just don't stop.
No,
whereas with the bigger games, I sometimes get a whole half hour to sit down.
Well, and for something like the team event as well, where you've got no sports scoring, no painting scoring, the only things you're dealing with are judging rules queries and that sort of thing. Yeah. And the matchup process isn't done by you. No. That's all done by the players. And using down under pairings, which is all set up for team events now. Yeah. The ability to literally just let the players populate that themselves, score themselves, and then all you're doing at the end of each round is telling which team is playing the next team. Yeah. It actually means that those, I think I've got them penciled in for 3 hour or just over 3 hour games, including the matchup times. Should be a relatively, like after the setup's done, you have a relatively cruisy day because you're not packing up at the end of day 1. And then come day 2, we've got a slightly later start. We've only got 2 games, and we're going to be home at a reasonable hour on the Sunday night. It's going to be interesting.
It will be. But with that, one of the good things about doing a team event is the way that I guess you shouldn't need a judge. Because the intention
the captains are meant to do it.
Captains are supposed to step in. So if 2 players have a disagreement around the way that something's supposed to work, the intention is that they take that to their captains, and their captain should be able to resolve that. And if their captains can't, then a third captain gets, is unbiased and is asked to come in and...
Yeah, which I think works in smaller formats.
What I was going to say is that in theory it sounds really good, but actually because there's a whole team riding on this, sometimes people, I think if you're just playing for you, people are more inclined to go, oh, okay, that's not how I thought it worked, but if that's what you're telling me, then sure. But I've actually got the weight of 6 people's results on my back here, so
I'm going to
argue this to make sure that I'm representing my team as best I possibly can.
Yeah, look, I think the fact that the ETC has been using its own judging panel for a number of years now. I judged ANZTC last year, and they had 2 judges there this year for 8 teams.
Yeah,
it's I think by and large the teams at that level can moderate it pretty well. But then we were on, I was on the stream with down at a network talking and going through commentating a couple of games, and they were getting questions that were in the FAQ that players in theory would have known or would have been able to look up themselves. And they were still getting some basic questions. So sometimes you just get in the heat of the moment and you just go, I don't know what the answer to this is. Someone else tell me what it is so we can get on with it.
Yeah.
And that's something to consider when you're going to run a team event. You need to make sure you've got enough hands on deck to manage that side of things. If you've got someone doing time warnings and helping people with their scoring, if they have any problems with doing the matchups and the scorings and that sort of thing at the start, then you get a little bit of a break and you can do the judging as you need to throughout the round. You're probably going to be set up. And I reckon, we've aimed for 14 teams this year, just due to the venue space. We're going to cap it out at 14. The 2 of us should be more than adequate for the 2 days.
Yeah.
There's a few extra things to consider when you start planning a team event. You also, one thing that most people won't think of is the prizing. Because if you traditionally give out a first, second and third place for generalship or overall or whatever your category happens to be, and you've got teams of 6 players, that's not 3, that's 18.
Yeah.
So be sure to remember that when you're ordering prizes and trophies and that sort of thing.
Particularly for medals and things like that.
Yeah.
I suppose, for anything, the cost of your prizes does go up significantly.
Yeah, because obviously if you've got a team of 6 to 8 as your first place and you've decided you're going to give them a get started box from their chosen armies, that's not $140 Australian dollars, that's $140 times 6.
Yeah.
So it's just something to think about. Now, the fun bit. And I'm not saying TOing is not fun, because it can be hugely enjoyable watching the results come in, particularly at the final rounds.
The last round, that is the part that I absolutely love. And I really wish that we actually, the conversations that we have...
You can't really share them.
I wonder if we can. I
think once the game's underway, you probably can. And, we could definitely try that for WATC Live.
Yeah, and the reason that I love it, and perhaps even for show, we'll see if we have capacity, time, energy, brain power.
Yeah.
What I love about it is sitting there and going, okay, so if this person does this and this person, so this is what we're thinking the results are going to be. However, if this person does this and this person does this and this person does this, then this is what the result could be.
Yeah.
Or if we see this happen, then this result could happen. And so we actually look at it and go through and go, okay, well, there's 4 different possible options here, depending on how the top-ranked players actually play.
Well, even yesterday and the day before, over the weekend, with the ANZTC, when we went to the final round, we knew that Queensland and WA were playing for 1 and 2.
Yes.
We knew that because they were the only 2 teams on 4-round wins.
Mm-hmm.
So even one of them losing it, no one else was on 3-round wins.
Yes.
Which meant that they were always going to be first and second. But third had 4 possible teams out of the remaining 6. Yeah. And they were playing in such a way that if Victoria beat who they were playing and the Mercs beat who they were playing and the Mercs beat them by enough points to pip Victoria, then you could have had the Mercs finish third.
Yeah.
And if the Mercs got upset and the Victorians got upset, then the other 2 teams were pretty close, and then it would come back to a count back, and then how many they beat their opponents by. So we had a real tussle for third place yesterday. And that's some really interesting analytics stuff you can get into when and as the data starts coming in, as people start finishing their games, you can start making some more educated guesses. And we, watching the final yesterday while we were streaming the WA Queensland round, we saw the first result come in, which was a 20-0 win to WA, followed immediately by the stream game, which was a 20-0 win to Queensland.
Yeah.
And we're going, okay, this is anyone's game. And then you'd watch another result in, WA's in front. Oh, no, Queensland's back in front. Oh, no, they're tied again. Oh, and it kind of went back and forth until I think the 5 games in, Queensland needed, I think it was 15 points from 3 games to ensure that the round ended in a draw, which would have then meant they won because they had more battle points. And it wasn't until the 7th game went in that they actually won the event. Yeah. The 8th game was only relevant for bragging rights and whatnot.
For the 2 people playing, it was quite important.
But for the team, from a team result perspective. Yeah. So speaking of putting teams together for these things...
Hang on, I had something else about that I wanted to add.
Well, you can keep thinking about that and we'll move on.
Yeah, because I was listening, so I forgot what I was thinking about.
So team events, they're my favourite event to play in. I love them wholeheartedly because you're playing as a group. You're not necessarily playing for your own results, and that's the first thing you have to wrap your head around.
And I think that just about everybody who I've ever same thing.
Yeah.
And a lot of people don't play in anything but team events.
The thing for me is the players who it's about the camaraderie and it's about working together and achieving a goal for everyone. The players who go into those events looking for their own personal scores, and look, Liam and Ben before them, 100 out of 100 for those events is nothing short of amazing, regardless of how they were used in the matchup processes. To get 5 perfect scores out of an event is nothing short of amazing. However, I guarantee both of those players didn't go into the event aiming for that result. They didn't go in going, it's only important I get 100 out of 100. They both went in wanting to win all their games so that their team wins.
Yeah.
But they weren't there for their own personal glory at the expense of the team's result.
No,
and I've seen
but
that happen.
At the same time, you're still aiming to get those 100 points because that, Queensland, I think, got 550
there was a big score,
up. Liam got a fifth of that.
Yeah, but what I'm saying is, though, there's...
I understand what you're saying.
Yeah.
It's about looking at the bigger picture and being able to take one for the team, being able to go, you know what, I've got the sucky matchup this time, but I'm going to do everything I can to claw as many points as possible to push our team closer to
But it's
an
not even that.
overall
It's
win.
I've seen players in the past ANZTCs where...
Sorry, Queensland got 578. I think I gypped them of 30 points when I was saying it before.
I've seen players at the expense of the team's matchups go, I want to play that because I know I can win.
Yes, yeah. I totally understand what you're saying, but you have to find the balance as well.
Absolutely.
Knowing
and the
that every
captains...
time you win, you're getting your team closer to... Nobody goes in going, oh, it's okay if I lose.
No. But like I say, attitude is really important for these team events. You have to go in looking at the team's results, and you will have to sometimes deal with the fact you're given these crummy matchups, or you're put up first and you have to take the brunt of it, or you're told by the captain that you have to take that matchup, even though it's not going to be fun, even though it's not going to be even remotely likely that you're going to win, because it helps the team's matchups later in the process. Being thrown under the bus, basically.
Yeah. Hence our big yellow bus episode.
Yes. So that's kind of the first thing you have to consider is you want a group of people who are going to work together well. And it sounds like, team event, you want to win the team event. Obviously, you want to try and get the best possible players involved. But again, if you've got 6 to 8 players on a team who are all the top players, but they don't like each other and don't get along, no one's going to take one for the other player in order for them to get a score. No one's going to... It's not going to work harmoniously. There's going to be arguments over which armies people get to take. The team actually has to get along reasonably well.
Yeah.
There has to be a good mix of personalities and a good mix of give and take in that process. And there's nothing wrong. Inevitably teams will end up with what were normally called swords and shields, where the sword players are the ones who try and go out and score those 20 points, and you're trying to get them ideal matchups. And the shields are the ones who try and absorb those in response. But that doesn't mean that because you're winning games, it makes you more important than the shield players who are doing their job as well. So it's important to have players who all get on well, have the right attitude, and kind of work in sync. The second part of putting a team together for these events, once you've established how many players you need, look at the location and figure out, can they actually go? Because it's one thing for us to host WATC here in Western Australia for teams of 6, and players have to travel. I mean, we've got a Bunbury team and a Albany team this year coming.
Awesome.
So Albany are driving 4 hours for the event. Bunbury will travel 2. It's quite another thing for something like the ETC or the American Team Championships, where if we're going to go to them, it's a 31-hour flight and transit time from...
That's the best flight I could find. 50-something hours was the
for us
average
in Perth,
flight time.
Yeah, for us in Perth to get to Tennessee, I found 31 hours with Perth to Sydney, Sydney to LA, LA to Atlanta, Atlanta to Chattanooga was the best possible result I could come up with. 31 hours, and we'd leave on the Tuesday and get there on the Tuesday morning and get there Thursday afternoon.
Which, bearing in mind the time difference...
Yeah, it's horrific.
Yeah.
It's so bad.
Yeah.
So... obviously, there's a significant time investment for some of these events and a cost.
Monetary investment as well.
So if you're going to go to the ETC from Australia as part of the Australian team, you're, depending on where it goes in Europe, you're up for a couple of $1,000s in airfares.
Yep.
You're then up for probably another couple of $100 minimum in accommodation. Now, in Poland, the accommodation was very cheap, but the accommodation was...
basic.
Yes.
You had your own shower and everything, didn't you?
Yes.
See, I'm okay with that.
No. Yeah. Oh, I'm not sure. I don't remember. There's parts of that trip I've grayed out. Yeah. So, you're up for, depending on how long the transit is and then how long you're staying at the event. If you're going for the singles that start before ETC, you're there for 5 days of gaming, which means you need to get there the day before. Then you've got 7 nights accommodation at a couple $100s a night, potentially.
Food and alcohol.
Yep. And whether you're a drinker or not, you're going to be buying drinks of some description. And even soft drink and water cost money, and you have to take that into account. And in some cases, those are more expensive than alcohol.
And our experience of Europe has been that it's much cheaper to be a drinker than it is to be a non-drinker. We spent some time in Europe, and we ended up drinking... It was basically cheaper to drink beer than it was to drink water.
Yeah.
So it's not great when it's 54 degrees.
No. Look, tumblers of ouzo are a thing in Greece. That's all I'm going to say.
Yeah. Not very refreshing,
no.
I would admit.
Particularly not in the afternoons after you've had a few.
I was actually thinking the ones that we had at 7 o'clock in the morning.
Oh, yeah. Not realising that's what they were at the time.
Yeah, it's a long time ago.
Anyway.
We were young.
The point of the story is that, there is some significant financial investment that's involved, and you probably, if you bank on $2,000 for the airfares, and then if you're staying for 4 to 5 nights, you bank on about $500 for that period of time for cheap accommodation. That can obviously double if you want to go for something nicer.
You can go a lot cheaper if you go backpacker.
Well, I wouldn't do that with my army left in the backpackers.
Well, you don't have to leave it.
When we did LVO, Sam and I shared a room, and that dropped it to $500 for the 4 nights rather than $1,000.
And you shared a room with Brett when you were over in Poland?
No, we got separate rooms in Poland.
Oh, that's right. You had the prison cell in Poland.
Yes.
Yeah. No, I remember now. Yeah.
Look, at least all the team was together. We were all across the hall from each other.
Yeah.
But
all in your separate cells.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There was a group cell for 4 of them.
On top of the cost of all that, which is something that I'm sure we'll be getting to in a minute, but potentially having to buy a new army as well.
Yep. And there's other things that you don't really think about. We were talking about...
Yeah, like the cost of buying a bag to get you over to Poland was something I really hadn't thought about.
I was actually talking about things like airport transfers, taxis while you're there, depending on where you're staying compared to the venue.
But those are things that you do for every holiday that people often forget. But, you know, having to buy a new carry case and one that will fit into
hand
all
luggage,
your overhead lockers and stuff like that that's a cost that people often don't think about until a month before when you go, oh, how am I going to get that there?
So to give me credit for Poland, I thought about that months in advance because I knew it was going to be difficult to do. So we actually had that carry case well in advance. I even had a letter from the airline saying that it met their requirements.
Yes.
But, it's definitely, the further away you're travelling, the more and more expensive it gets, not only in dollars but in time. Because
time away from family, time away from work. Yeah, the amount of wife credits you have to use.
Partner credits.
Yeah. No, I was talking about your wife credits.
Oh, my wife credits, yeah.
And you are You are so in debt, it's not
But
funny.
that's fine. I'm trying to convince Emma to play so that she can come on the team for OBSEC in Tennessee. Anyway, so yeah, you're up for as an example with the Tennessee trip. It's not a 3-day tournament. It's about 9 days for us to do it because we have to fly, including the transit time, get there the day before, the tournament itself, leave the day after, and then the transit time again. It's about 9 days end to end to do that. LVO for the 3-day tournament, I think, was 7 days.
Yeah.
Because obviously Perth to Sydney, Sydney to LA, LA to Vegas was 20 hours or something like that.
About that.
So, and on the way back, you lose a day in the time difference as well.
Yeah.
So, you have to basically have a team that is aware of all that right at the front end. There's no point in putting a team together and then have them going, oh, I can't afford $3,000 to do that.
Or I can't get a week and a half off work in order to be able to do that.
And it sounds really dopey to say that, but the amount of people who are so keen to do these trips, and then when you actually outline, hey, okay, this is the investment, and I'm not just talking about the financial, but this is the total investment and commitment, a lot of people balk at that and go, oh, actually, I can't do that.
I get that.
Yeah. Absolutely. I mean,
in theory, it sounds awesome to be able to jump on a plane and go and play games for 3 days.
Yeah.
But the reality and the romanticized version of it that I have in my head are very different.
Oh, yes. Yes. Very much so. So I think when you're putting, if you've got a local team event, it's not a big deal. You're paying for the tournament entry.
Yeah. Look, it's not a big deal. Having said that, the person who forks out for that tournament entry, it's
a big number.
We had that conversation,
Yeah.
and it's $90 per player, $80 per player, 6 players, so it's $480 for the team ticket.
Yep.
Someone has to put $480 on their credit card.
Yep.
And when you see $480 for a ticket for an event,
you go, oh, hang on.
It feels big.
It does.
And when you pare that down and go, okay, well, actually, no, that's 6 people's tickets and $10 from every entry goes towards the prize pool and
all the rest of it.
thing.
Yeah. And that's the thing. If you look at the, I think the American one is $100 a player.
Okay.
And the ETC, I think, was €70 a player. And obviously that varies due to the economy of the country and the what's going on at the time. I know that the ETC ran in Switzerland 1 year, which was in euros, and then since then they've never gone back to a country with euros because it's cheaper to go to Poland with the zloty or Greece or somewhere that they don't use the currency, the euro, because the exchange rate's so good for everyone else. And it does wonders for the local economy when you have 500 gamers or 1,000 gamers descend on an area and drink the pubs dry.
No, we're not all about alcohol, just in case that's the perception that we're giving.
No, but these trips inevitably end up as that sort of bonding weekends. They some of the teams take it super seriously and they don't go out at night. They don't go and do any of the social stuff until after the event's over. And then sometimes if they don't win, the coaches don't let them go out after the event. I have seen teams at the end of day one essentially get locked in their rooms to go through theories and practice and all the rest of it. In my experience, particularly when we went to Poland, I think I was out until about 1 a.m. or 2 a.m. on the first night. And the next day's game started at, I think it was 9.
Yeah.
And that was okay for me because I could deal with it. Plenty of the Australian players were out until 4 or 5 a.m. and they chose to do that and they got up and played the next day and that was fine. But at the same time, that going out that night was awesome because I got to know so many other players from some of the other teams that I'm still talked to this day. And that's kind of, when you're doing those big trips, that's what you want to be doing. You want to actually be going out and experiencing things. And even if that's with just your teammates, the social side of it can't be underestimated because it's about the entire journey and the trip. Obviously, the results matter, but yeah, the shared experience, I think, is what sort of bonds players together. And I know that one of the guys who played the year I went to Poland was actually playing at the ANZTC this weekend for South Australia. Diffie was there, Tom was there. So there was 3, I think, from that year's team in the one space that year. It's probably the most that's from that year that's ever been together. Actually, we had 4 last year because we had Brett fly over from Queensland.
Yeah,
So there were 4 of us from the inaugural team.
because there was you, Diffie, Brett, and Tom.
Yes.
all in the same place. Yeah,
All doing very different things.
yeah,
But that's still a shared experience we all have, and we all remember some of the weird things that happened and the things we saw and the places we visited, and that's kind of why I really enjoy these events so much. Even going to LVO, even though it was a singles event, there were still 10 Aussies in that
Yeah.
room, and
You
we all
went as the
shared.
Aussie team, even though it wasn't a team event.
Yeah.
yeah, definitely.
This goes the next step though, and you're all working together for a single result. You're not, potentially working against each other where there's a possibility of you playing later in the event. So you've got 6 to 8 dedicated players who know the cost.
Mm-hmm.
The cost being potentially
talked about.
several $1,000s and a bunch of time. The next step is armies, which you hinted at a moment ago. Most of these events use a similar format where you can only use each army once.
Mm-hmm.
So if 3 of your mates and you all play Craftworld Eldar, it's going to be some
2
disappointed.
of you are out of luck.
Yeah, there's going to be some disappointed players.
And also, if you, I guess we talk about soup armies quite often, so if all of your friends have different Craftworld Eldar units or elements to your armies, well, that can't happen.
Yeah. And things like the Imperium for 40k are a big problem there, where everyone wants to run assassins. Well, one of you can.
Yep.
And that's the end of the conversation. One of you can run knights. One of you can run space marines.
So it takes players who are able to work together really well, but who are able to.
There's got to be some flexibility in it.
Well, there some flexibility and the ability for, I guess, self-reflection as well, to go, you know what? Out of the 6 of us, you're the person who gets the biggest advantage, or that uses the assassins to the best of their ability, or that's going to make the biggest impact using them with the army that you're running. So the other 5 of us won't take it, because for the good of the whole team,
it makes
you're
sense.
the one that's it.
Yeah. And
So
that
being
can't
able
be
to
underestimated.
think, no, and it's really difficult.
What's more interesting as well is I think the American format with only 5 teams actually makes it a lot easier on players.
Oh, you remember right back at the beginning that I said that there was something else that I wanted to add? I just remembered it.
Go on.
It can't be overestimated or underestimated that when it comes down to it, generally it's grown men, and I know that there are some women, but generally it's grown men playing with toy soldiers. So I think that's when you kind of have to check the ego a little bit.
Yeah.
And remember that you're not playing for sheep stations. This isn't going to change your financial lifestyle.
No.
You're not going to become rich and famous from doing it.
You get nerd famous.
Well, yes, there's some issues with that, depending on your level of embarrassment. But anyway, so, when this came back to what you were talking about earlier with being able to put the good of the team above yourself, like actually remember why you're playing this.
Yeah.
That it is just about having fun, and that, I guess keep things in perspective.
Yeah, fair call. So yeah, what I was saying,
Before I interrupted because I had a ping moment.
Yeah, epiphany. The American format with only 5 players actually makes it a lot easier on the teams, because you've got 20-something 40k armies to pick from, and with only 5...
You can have 4 each.
Well, with 5 players, you can realistically go, cool, you're playing Eldar, you're playing Imperium, you're playing Chaos, and then the other 2 players get a choice from all the other Xenos codexes, or you can go 2 Imperium, 2 Chaos, because there's enough intermix, or even 2 Eldar by mixing and matching between the factions of the Eldar. Whereas going to 6 makes it a little bit more awkward. Going to 8 actually creates some... You have to start taking armies that people don't normally expect, and that can be seen from the teams that were taken on the weekend to the ANZ TC. So WA, for example, had...
So I like that as well.
Yeah,
I like that it makes people think outside the box.
Yeah, so WA had... it was a pure Ultramarines army, a pure Custodes army. The third army was Mechanicum and Knights. Mm-hmm. The fourth army was pure Craftworld. Actually, it's not pure Craftworld because it had an Ari in there as well. Old Ari, I should say, at time of recording, not the new one. We had Astra Militarum Blood Angels, we had Genestealer Cult Tyranids, and we had Tau. Oh, and Drukhari, pure Drukhari. So there's elements of those armies that you might not normally see in play, and it sort of runs through all of them. When you look at Queensland, you had essentially pure... Oh, it wasn't pure Drukhari, it was Drukhari Craftworld. You had pure Orcs, which don't have any allies anyway. Death Guard Thousand Suns, Tyranids, Genestealer Cults, Knights, Astra Militarum, and Assassins.
Oh, that's greedy, taking 3.
Tau, Astartes, and then Deathwatch Sisters of Battle.
And Mick, I was only joking then. Just if you're listening to this.
So, you start seeing some armies you wouldn't normally see at tournament play because they don't stand up on their own 2 feet in single style formats as commonly.
Yeah.
Whereas in teams, you can actually start shielding them from matchups and giving them games where they can win, because you can start manipulating that process if you want to get those players wins with those armies. And that's really some of the interesting stuff that comes out of these lists, that you start looking at them and going, what's the goal there? How does that work? What does that actually do? And then part of the fun then, once the lists are published, and they're normally published a few weeks out so that teams can check them, normally gives you the opportunity as a team to kind of sit down together and go, okay, I'm missing something. What does this do?
Yeah. And that would be particularly with, I guess, with team events, but particularly with something like the Australian New Zealand Team Championship, or the European Team Championship, where it's one team from each country.
Yeah.
Have a think about the fact that these are the best representatives of a state or the best representatives of a country. Admittedly, that is with the caveat of the best representatives of a state or country that can afford to attend the event. But these, generally, they're going to have made their decision for their army based on a whole heap of information and experience.
Yep.
So if you're looking at an army, for example, Tio's army, which...
Oh, David Tio's from New South Wales, yep.
People are looking at that going... Well, actually, no, there is another army, but I can't think what it is off the top of my head from the weekend. But people were looking at it going, like,
It's a starter army, what's going on?
Well, yeah, that's it. Like, okay, well, he's going to be an easy one to beat. Well, is he?
And then he doesn't drop a game.
Or is he seeing something that you haven't seen?
Yeah. Are there stratagems that you haven't considered that he gets to use? Or are there combinations of units that you haven't seen before that are interacting in a way that you're not expecting?
So if you're looking at the lists from last weekend's event, going, well, that's a simple army, and why would anyone take that? Chances are you're missing something, not him.
Yeah. Oh, look, I know that the East Coast, generally speaking, wrote off Lockie's Custodes army because it was using Forge World units. And the Flyers in particular were grossly underestimated. And Lockie went 5 for 5 on the weekend as a result. By the same token, you can get caught out sometimes because in the final round, Matt Aird with his Tau played Rory Argent's Tau, and it wasn't until they got to the table, they picked that matchup, had a plan, and then realised that the FAQ didn't actually let WA do what they thought they could do. Matt still pulled a win out of that game, but that ruined that matchup for them because they weren't ready. They weren't ready based on the fact they'd overlooked an FAQ which stopped them doing what they thought they could do. And that's no one's fault individually, because the team has had that conversation and there's obviously a level of prior knowledge, and it was a community FAQ, not an official FAQ. So it was one that's not been used locally.
Okay.
So they can be completely forgiven for missing that. But at the same time, when you're going to this sort of event, you can't afford to not inspect those sorts of things. So
one of the good things about having a team, particularly with social media being as prevalent as it is at the moment, means that you can create team chats. And so when those army lists are released, you can actually go through and go, okay, go through each one. What's everyone's thoughts on this? How do you think that we will, is there something that I'm missing from this one? But it's actually really important to do that with your own team's lists before you publish them. Before they get published. Yeah, before they have to be submitted, and go through and say to everyone, is there anything from my list that I'm missing? And I think I was talking to Simon from Queensland about this when we were over there, and he was saying, I can't remember which event he was talking about, but he was saying that, in a team event, everyone just thought, oh, well, that's his army. He knows what he's doing.
Yeah, that's a big risk.
Didn't think to actually go, what is it that you're hoping to do with those units? And you know that you can't do that, right?
Yeah.
It doesn't work that way. So knowing that it's okay to challenge people on your team, doing it respectfully, but going, how do you think that that's actually going to work? And my understanding is that won't work that way.
Yeah. Look, that level of giving a player too much rope, I suppose, is the way that we've termed it in the team before, where we've made false assumptions that the player in question knows what they're doing. They've won events with this army. We don't need to hold them to the same standard as the rest of us because they know what they're doing.
Mm.
And there's been results that have reflected the fact that they've not been naysayed in their own opinions, which has led to armies going to the event that aren't as good as they could or should have been, which means that, people have lost rounds as a result.
But also that the conversation that comes from challenges can be really good for growth.
Well, it also highlights things that you might not have considered before.
Exactly. That's exactly what I'm talking about.
Yeah. So,
for example, the conversation where I nearly beat the living daylights out of you, except that we're a non-violent family, over the gene stealers, where we spent the entire time talking about this army that you're going to take and why you would use it. And I challenged you on it, and you went, oh, well, actually, I'm not going to take that. I'm going to do all of this instead because, but having the ability to have that conversation with people rather than it just living in your own head.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I'm not saying that went well because you didn't exactly
I didn't win.
blow the room away with that event. But, it can be really useful to actually have a sounding board and not live within your own echo chamber.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's a really good way of putting it because, I'm super familiar with a bunch of armies and not with others. And we were having a conversation on the stream, I think it was day one for the ANZ TC, and one of the players said, oh, if you do this, then you auto-win against Gene Stealer Cult. And I went, huh? I've never heard of that before. Can you tell me where that is? And obviously being at home while on the stream, I had all my books available. And I started digging through the books trying to find out what he was referencing. And I found one of the stratagems he was talking about and went back to them and went, where's the other interaction? Because what you've told me doesn't match what I'm actually reading. He came back and said, here's the interaction. I said, no, I don't know where you've got that from, but you've implied that from X, Y, and Z, which meant that even though that wasn't even happening, what we were watching, it meant that I learned about another sneaky thing
that you didn't
that I didn't know about, and he learnt that the second level of the sneakiness couldn't work. So we both sort of gained out of that, which was great. I definitely think the team events give you that opportunity for growth. If you've got good friends who you game with and work with, like Brett was a sounding board for me for a decade with army building for tournaments.
It probably still is, really.
Yeah. We would play without.
Whereas now it's just done over the phone talking about armies rather than actually play testing them. But
we would, there was never any malice in who was winning or losing. It was a case of, okay, cool. We workshopped it and workshopped it and workshopped it. And you would argue with each other based on choices. Why are you taking that? That doesn't make any sense. How does that work? Ultimately, you need to do that within the teams even more so because you are more limited in your selection options.
But doing it really respectfully.
Yeah, absolutely. You don't call people names and stuff. You have to kind of go, well, what's the thought process? Why is that a choice you're making? Have you considered what it means if you have to play this? And sometimes the player in question will go, no, I've thought of all that. This is why. And you go, okay, fair enough. And then when you get to the matchup component, which is kind of, once the army lists are published, most teams who are seeking to compete and win will do a process of analysis around the opponent's lists. So they'll take the lists. If they know who they're playing in the first round or more rounds than the first, then obviously they'll be able to focus a bit more.
Well, it works really well for something like the ANZ Team Championship where you're playing every other team that's there.
They didn't this year.
Oh, yeah, no, well, that's...
Last
yeah.
year they did, because there were only
Yeah.
6 teams last year, but 8 teams this year means they dodged 2.
Having said that, you can still do this process that I'm sure you're about to talk about with the traffic light.
Yeah.
You can still do this for 8 teams, whereas if there's 64 teams in the room,
Oh, yeah.
it's a big process to go through for
doing
64 teams.
For Poland, we had 28 teams, because we finished 14th. We were
Smack
just
in
above the middle.
Yeah.
And teams of 8. So 28 teams of 8, which is an awful lot of players, which I can't do the maths on at the moment.
I can't do that either, but it's slightly less than 280.
Yeah. It's about 250, give or take.
Probably a bit, about 220.
Oh, I'll have to get the calculator.
226-ish?
224.
Oh, so close.
So 224 lists was what we got. Now, obviously, you can take your 8 out of that as well, which left us with 216 lists to go through.
Yeah.
And we basically, Josh was the captain that year, and Josh went, okay, cool. Tell me which ones you want to play and which ones you don't want to play. And so you do a traffic light system, red, green, and yellow. Yeah, red being, please don't let me play that. Green means, yeah, I think I can win that. And yellow meaning, who knows.
It's amber. A traffic light has amber. It doesn't
yellow.
have yellow. It's amber.
It's yellow. Anyway. And that lets you then start building a profile.
I would have gone orange, but it's not yellow.
Just let it go. It's yellow. So we're going to once as a captain you've gone through and had all the players rate all of those, you can then basically build up a grid that you can then see how each of your players goes against each of the opposing team. And then you can start planning how you're going to generate that matchup process. Now, if you get a list that everyone agrees is green, that sounds fantastic. But if there's lists that are 95% red, that's something else you have to factor in as well.
Yeah,
So,
and it is, because you can't just look at it. We really need to do this as a video, I think. But you can't just look at it and go, okay, so I'm going to use David Teo as an example because his name is in my head, because we've been talking about Teo and I got confused with Teo's and David Teo. But anyway, so his name's in my head. Okay, so for example, David Teo gets put up. Everyone in our team thinks that they can win against him.
Yep.
You can't just go, oh, well, that's fine. Just whack 2 in there.
Yeah.
Because it doesn't matter who he picks, because
we're going to win.
We're going to win. But you actually have to work it backwards to who's got the least good options for every
Later
other
on.
matchup.
Yep.
So that I'm not going to be detrimental to future options that I'm going to put up for a matchup.
You've also, because of the way the process works, where you have to
Does that
put...
make sense?
Yeah.
Okay. I mean, it does to us, but would it if you don't know how the matchup works?
Go and watch the video. It's on the Objective Secured YouTube channel.
Yeah.
The other thing to consider, if you've got a player that's only got 2 good matchups, and then you've got another player that's got 3 good matchups, if those 2 players' good matchups cross over, that's perfect. It's when they don't that you start having issues.
Yeah.
Because when you're putting defenders up, you have to put 2 of them up at a time.
Yes.
Which means that one of them's going to get picked and one of them isn't. And if your one that's only got 2 good matchups isn't picked, then they've just lost one of their good matchups, which means you've now only got 1 left.
And you are really hoping.
Which means that, again, you either have to put them up and hope that you get given one of their 2 good matchups, which is unlikely if the other opponents are looking at it the same way you are, or put them up as a counter, as a defender, and then hope that they're picked as the lesser of 2 evils.
Yeah.
And again, it starts talking about the psychology of the captains,
Yeah.
the players, and second-guessing your opponent. We had this in 2016. We were all sat at the end of day 1 trying to figure out how to beat Queensland on day 2.
Which clearly didn't work. But
No,
anyway.
but the matchup process did, because we went through the armies and went... we were looking at Hayden's army specifically, his Tau, and this is 7th edition, so it's a slightly different game now, but we all looked at it and went, oh no, like that is no one wanted that game. No one at all. And we assumed, and it turns out rightly so, that they would use him as the final game because it didn't matter who he got.
He didn't do okay.
He didn't care. And we were all kind of throwing around the army, okay, knowing that, who gets to play him and how do we beat it? And someone pointed out that all of his guns were only AP 4, and back in the day, if your AP didn't exceed the target's armor value, you always got a save. And it was at that point someone pointed out that my entire army was 3+ armor and could get back up. And all of a sudden we all went, well, hang on a minute. if we can get the Necrons to play the Tau in that game, we at least alleviate all of the benefits that they also had a special rule at the time which allowed them to shoot at rear armor on vehicles regardless of facing. The only vehicle I had was armor 14 all around. So again, we found an army that we went, no one had considered, because we just went, oh, no one wants to deal with that. Oh, hang on a minute, Mike's army can deal with that. And Ducky for that weekend was on 80 out of 80 going into that final round, and he lost 18-2 to me. Because we'd bet, and it was a gamble, but we'd bet on the psychology of the team.
He thought that he was going to...
And we assumed that the captain would think the same way, which meant that when we got to that final matchup process, I got paired with Ducky, which meant that I was able to actually beat him. Now, it didn't win us the round, but the psychology of that process worked really well. So, if you can... it kind of works when you've only got 8 teams and you know the personalities involved. When you've got 50 teams of 5, you probably can't bank on that.
And when you've got... so when you've got 116 different armies that you've got, was it 216 different armies that you've got to traffic light your way through, gets somewhat tricky. And if you're in if you're playing in something like the ANZ Team Championship, there are other things that you can do in order to help you with those traffic light type systems.
Yeah.
For example, Simon from Queensland has Godhammer Gaming, and he quite often posts his games.
Yeah.
So you can see how he plays, how he uses his army. He will, with his commentary, he tells you what he's doing and why he's doing it.
Yep.
So you actually get to learn how he plays so that you can work out, is there a way that I can counter his playing style?
Yeah.
So you've got different things you can use, but that does get somewhat trickier because it's quite hard to find 216 different players on YouTube and how they all play. If you're prepared to do the work and you start now, you might be ready in 2 years' time. Yeah, that's it. But different things to think about, I guess, when you're looking at how that matchup process could possibly work, is know as much as you possibly can about how your army works, but how other people play their army. Now,
obviously, when you're travelling to those international events like we talked about, for us going to ETC the first time, we had no idea. And to be fair, the big name personalities that go, like the Americans and a lot of the UK players, are well known, not commodities, but well known personalities that you can kind of predict what's going to come. And you know the kind of play style they have because they go every year and they get a bit of a reputation. Going to something like the American event would be a complete unknown. You're kind of going in blind and having to look purely at the armies in question. You might know the names like Nick Nanavati or some of those guys.
Yeah, but having said that, okay, so we've mentioned Chad's name on this how many times now? If we do manage after show, because I'm not thinking about it until show, but say after show we sit down and we work out that, yes, we can take a team over to
America,
the American Team Challenge, Team Championship, whatever it is, the ATC over in America, Tennessee. Say we decide that we can do that.
Yep.
Is the first thing that you do not going to be to contact Chad and go, right, who are the big names that I need to be looking at for this?
I'd actually start with this year's results.
Well, yes, that does make sense. But,
do some recon.
That's it. Use the resources that you've got available, whether that's resources like Down Under pairings if you're doing
Best Coast
pairings that's over on the eastern side west side of
West Coast of America.
So looking, what have you got? Just Google and see what results you can find. Doing it that way, see what names pop up regularly.
Yeah, look, I mean, the results on the ATC, I think, are on their website for the last couple of years. So you'd very quickly be able to build a profile of the top 5 to 10 teams. And you'd still go and do traffic light on all of the teams.
Yeah, definitely.
But you'd probably spend more time on those names. Not even if they're in the same teams, but if you know that someone like Nick Nanavati is playing, then that probably bears more conversation but from the teams because of his reputation and because of what he's won.
I guess for me, what I would be looking at is actually going, we're in Australia, right?
Mm-hmm.
And Australians, from everything I can understand, Australians play differently to Americans.
Yep.
So I would be going and sitting down and watching as many different games, American games, as I possibly could.
Yep.
So I can see those styles of play.
And there's plenty of those YouTube channels to go looking for.
Yeah. So learning about how different people play different armies, and particularly if anything from the ATC has been streamed, so you can see how people who are playing straight armies or pure armies go, or as close to pure armies as possible. Doing that kind of thing.
Yeah, look, the process doesn't have to be arduous. If you're just going as a team, having some idea of your matchups before you get there is always going to speed the process up.
Yeah, definitely.
So I would always suggest at the very least everyone going red, green, yellow, and going through all the lists and doing that just so that you can have some preparation done. And then if you guys decide, you know what, you can write whatever army you like and you know, no one's going to put any more effort in than that, at least you're going over with a matchup process that you can look at and go, okay, cool, we want that person to play that person, that person, we stuffed that up, you're going to have to play a red. Sorry.
Yeah.
At least you're doing the minimum amount required to show some respect to your opponent so you don't drag that process out over an extended period of time.
Because we allow between 15 and 30 minutes for the matchup process. But if you finish that matchup process early,
everyone starts.
You get longer to play.
Yeah.
So whereas if you finish that matchup later, your captain and whoever are the last people who are picked for
you're cutting into game time.
That's it. You don't get extra time because your captain couldn't get your matchup sorted quickly.
No. So
it's in your best interest to do as
have
much prep work as you possibly can to make that process quick.
And, you know, a basic spreadsheet with an Excel grid is all it takes. But at the same time, the more work you put in, the more likely you are to find those weird little combos and idiosyncrasies and figure them out and then go, oh, you know what, I put that as a red, but now I know this stuff. I know how I can mitigate that. Oh, it's actually an orange for me.
Yeah.
Amber, yellow, whatever colour you want to call it.
Whatever. It's fine. I've moved on.
So
it's no longer red or green. How's that?
Yeah.
It's the one in the middle. Brown.
The worst one we had was 2015. The first year I captained WA in 2014, we had red, green, and he who shall not be. No, well, I'm going to call it yellow because we're the yellow bus episode, so it's yellow.
Fine.
The second year, when we were doing this as a team, someone at some point decided that they would add orange.
Oh.
Because it wasn't yellow, but it wasn't red, so it was orange. And then someone decided to add lime because it wasn't yellow, but it wasn't green.
So you've now created a Likert scale.
Yes. And that only got worse. That really got confusing as a captain because there's no decisiveness there. It's either good enough that you can win it or it's bad enough that you'll lose it. Don't tell me that you might lose it, but you also don't know because that tells me you need to go and read more.
I don't know because I think, look, I am going to lose. However, I can probably pull a 14-6 loss out of it rather than a 20-zip. You know, I can pull some points for us.
Yeah, but
whereas
it's still a loss.
It is still a loss, but if you're playing that and you're going to get a 20-0 loss, put me up for that loss rather than you because I'll pull some points back.
Yeah, and so WA, since that year, so the third year that we captained and we finished second and we've done it ever since 2016, we actually asked the players to rate it as a score of 0 to 20.
Yeah, okay.
So that we are a bit more... we can kind of build an expected score for the round. Now, the problem with doing this is it requires the players to have an intimate knowledge of their own armies, their opponent's armies, and the missions. Because it's no good saying that, I can beat that Space Marine army 20-0, and then you lose at 20-0 because you didn't think about the mission, or the deployment, or the terrain.
Or you haven't actually written your army list yet.
Or you've picked the wrong table, and there's, the table doesn't work.
Yeah.
So...
Because that's another thing to think about. You do actually pick the table as well.
Yes.
Which in an Australian or ETC style event makes a difference.
Absolutely, because typically there's 2 terrain heavy, 2 terrain light, and 4 terrain moderates.
Whereas I guess if you're in an ITC mission, an ITC event, my understanding
they're pretty standard.
You've got standard terrain.
Yeah.
So picking a table doesn't really make too much difference.
Well, I know that talking to some of the guys at the end of day one with David Teo, because we'll go back to him again because his army list was so unusual for this format. His tactic seems to have been make sure he's the one who's put up, so he gets to pick the table. And he's picked high density terrain and made sure that the armies he's picked have been shooting armies. So he's been able to completely negate their advantages because there's no line of sight.
So he's spending it hiding.
Scoring points.
No, it's a legitimate tactic.
I mean, he played Tau in round 4 and won at 20-0 with 38 victory points to 15. So I can't see any of the in-depth stuff around how many kills he got or how he got those 38 points, but those 38 points came from somewhere. So, there's clearly a process there that he's employed to make sure that he's getting the tables he needs. And again, he's the second player in that process. So that's another thing to think about. So the number side of things can be really good as long as your players are on it. They understand how their armies work. They understand how their opponent's armies work. And they either don't care about the table or they build it into their thought processes that they go, okay, I know the guys this year used what they called a swing score. So they had a second column for every opponent where they might score someone as a 15-5 win, but then they've got a 3-point swing, which means that it could be an 18 or it could be a 12, depending on the table or the mission or whatever note that they wanted to put beside it. So you can really drill into it. Now, doing that as a practicality lesson over 200-plus army lists probably doesn't fly.
I mean, yeah, you could look at it and go, all right, well, particularly if you know the first mission, and your first opponent, then you can go, okay, well, WA is playing. Who did WA play first?
New South Wales, I think it was.
So WA is playing New South Wales, and we know what the mission is, and so based on that mission, you're able to give, some really solid thinking behind what your results are going to be. You don't really have the capacity to go, okay, well, with mission 2 against 216, this is what I think. For mission 3 against 216, well, that changes it this way. You do have to give kind of this overall picture that based purely on the armies. Which
is why I think so many teams at those big events just go, you know what, we're going to traffic light it. Because it just doesn't make any practical sense to go through and try and work it out every permutation. Like if you've got those 200 and what did we work it out to be?
216.
So 216 lists. You're going to take away 8 because you know who you're playing.
We already took.
No. We're going to take another 8 because we know we're playing them round 1 because they're almost always published for these events.
Okay.
So there's now 208 lists available, and typically these are 6-round events. So we're going to multiply this by 5, and we end up with over 1,000 permutations that we have to factor in. That's just not practical.
No.
The amount of time to do that, even if you have the inclination, that's days of work.
If this is your full-time job and there's big money on the table. And
that'd make total sense too, yeah.
Yeah. But come back to, we're not playing for Sheep Station. This is grown-ups
such an
playing
Aussie saying.
Yeah, I know. I've really got to... grown up... Well, it could be a New Zealand saying as well.
Yeah.
Or Welsh. Probably shouldn't have said that.
No.
But yeah, with this grown-ups playing with toy soldiers, it doesn't need 1,040 different...
No. You might, and again, you might pick a team or two to do that with if you know you're going to meet them. So using...
But there's no way you can know you're going to meet them.
But, so again, I'll go back to the ANZTC. We, as a WA, I'll use we because I'm the rep for WA. We knew...
And we're West Australian, so yeah.
So we knew WA was who they were playing in rounds 1, 2 and 3.
Okay.
They were all pre-seeded.
Right.
So that makes it easy because we've now only got 4 teams to look at for their final 2 rounds. The team in question chose to specifically look at Queensland, even though they weren't one of the teams we were playing on day 1.
Yeah.
Because Queensland was, in everyone's opinion, and apparently rightly so, the team to beat.
Yeah.
So Queensland went into the mix straight away, and they were already playing New South Wales. They were already playing the Queensland Mercs, and they were already playing Victoria. Now, they ended up playing the ACT, which, as far as I'm aware, they did the basic process for, but didn't do the extra layer of work for because they didn't expect to play them. Now, they'd still done the prep work and they'd still worked out who their matchup process and all the rest of it, and they still won the round. But they put more work into Queensland because they were working on the theory of, if we want to win the event, we have to be able to beat Queensland.
Yeah.
Now, if they'd lost all 3 of their day 1 games, they wouldn't have played Queensland.
Yeah.
They were obviously backing themselves in that regard. But when you can eliminate 3 of the 7 possible teams, and you've only got 2 missions left, doing that 6 times, 6 times, 7 times, 8 times, 8 times, 4 teams, 2 missions, 8 times. isn't a big thing if you really wanted to go through and drill it all in and do it all properly. And look, the team may have. I didn't see the last final spreadsheets before they went away. But when it's only 8 teams, you can do that.
Yeah. Or on the Saturday night, you go,
Who do we have to look at? Because who are
it.
we playing tomorrow? And I think that's probably a more likely scenario is that I didn't see the ACT prep because it was done on Saturday night at the hotel where the guys went, okay, we know who we're playing tomorrow now based on the brackets. And that's a very, very likely scenario, much like we did in 2016. So there is an awful lot of prep work you can put into these events as a player. And it can get quite complicated. It'll all come down to how heavily you want to compete. There's a minimum level of expectation in my mind around that traffic light system.
Yeah.
And then the workshopping and the practice games are the other component of this prep. If you're flying all the way to the other side of the world to play, as fun as it is to go and play these events, I also go to win. There are very few events that I go to these days where I want to actively super compete and it's important for me to win games.
Oh, I don't like the term super compete. I think
I always want to win games.
Yeah, but that comes with connotations, super compete.
I take the game more seriously then, is probably a better way of putting it. When I play...
You're still a nice guy across the table and good sports.
Yeah, but I'm way more likely to...
Not let them re-roll or not let them go back and move models because they missed out on that phase and that kind of thing.
I'll play it more strictly.
Yeah.
So I'm quite happy to go and play. When you're playing at those events, though, that's almost an expectation I find for most players, is that you're not going to allow take-backs. You're not going to allow that sort of thing. And there are some teams that expect it, or they're not used to not being able to. The prep work that we've always done has always been assume that if you make a mistake, you're going to be held for it. At which point, if you make that assumption that that's what's going to happen to you, then you do the same for everyone else. And most players are really amicable about it. And if you're playing a game and your opponent, you mess up and you forget something, your opponent goes, yeah, no worries, go for it. Then obviously you extend that courtesy back.
So make sure you show the
Don't
same.
be that guy and deny them what they've offered you in good faith.
Yeah.
So yeah, look, I would thoroughly recommend doing a team event if you haven't already. If you're in Western Australia, WATC is in August? Yes, August.
Yep, but I'm not thinking about that till after show.
No, all the tickets go on sale after show, except for our patrons, who have already bought 5 of the 14 tickets, I think it is.
Yeah.
And then by the time we hit WATC, the ETC will have been and gone, as far as I'm aware. I think that's in July.
That's my understanding.
And we'll have also had the ATC in Tennessee.
Yes.
So,
yes.
Yeah, it's there's a big bunch in the middle there where there's a whole bunch of team events. And so pretty much wherever you are in the world, you should be able to make it to one. Go and do it. Hang out with your friends. Play a couple of days of 40K. Or your chosen game system, because the ATC and the ETC host multiple games in team formats. Go and play. Join in with your friends. Have a bit of prep work done to it. Have a think about how you're going to get your army there. Make sure your army is built and painted before you fly out. There have been plenty of horror stories I've seen over the years where people have been painting the night before the event halfway around the world without the right tools, sometimes without paints. It's
just because you can paint with nail polish doesn't mean you should.
No. But more importantly, gets practice.
That's my words of wisdom for the day.
Oh, okay.
Practice.
Practice is always going to make perfect in whatever you do in life. But if you're practicing with an army, if you've written an army, the team's all happy with it, and assuming there's no weird FAQs or releases or anything like that which changes what you're doing, the sooner you can get your army nailed down with what you're going to be taking means it's going to be built earlier, it's going to be painted earlier, but it's also going to get a lot more practice on the table so that you can iron out some of the kinks and foibles, or you can change the army
before
closer to the deadline.
That's it.
Then rather than submitting a list 24 hours, like writing the list 24 hours before the thing's due and then figuring out, hey, I've got 4 weeks to build and paint this army.
Or submitting the list,
finding
you've got 4 weeks, build and paint it, and then go, this doesn't work the way that I thought it was going to. and now I'm stuck playing this list, because the psychology of going into an event knowing that your list doesn't work the way that you thought it would, it's not going to do well for you on the table.
No.
Whereas if you've gone, however many months out, okay, this is what I'm going to take. I've been practicing with it. Oh, hang on a minute, this doesn't do what I think it should. Let's workshop how, as a team, let's workshop how we can make this better, make it better, then submit it. You're going in with a lot better positive mind frame.
Yep. One other little thing I'll put in before we wrap this topic up, and again, it's something that we've done as a team locally and nationally and internationally, was kind of pairing off with people within the team or even external members of the community to go through and workshop some of the weird things and essentially be an individual naysayer. So just essentially having a sounding board outside of the team because obviously you can essentially create your own echo chamber there where you convince the team that everything's fine.
And I do mean this with love, but you are, no, I shouldn't have said but, because that negates it. I do mean this with love. You are quite a strong personality. And so when you speak with authority, and sometimes you're wrong.
Yeah. I'm okay with admitting when I'm wrong, though.
Yeah, you are. But because you speak with authority, people don't challenge you.
That is true.
So if you're in a team and you've been on that team for the last X number of years and, you do a podcast and people believe you, you need someone who will challenge you and go, actually, you're saying this with conviction that I'm wrong, but I don't think I am, and this is why I don't think I am. So when you've got a team of good friends who you've managed to convince that this is the best possible army for you to take, they're not going to challenge you.
No.
So you need people outside who will go, yeah, Mike, you're wrong.
Yeah. And that's what I was hinting at, is you want...
I know you were hinting. I was just outright saying it.
Yeah. You do... There's nothing wrong with bringing outside opinions into the fold. Depending on the event in question and whether they're playing it for another team, you might not bring certain people in, or if they're friends with someone else who you're trying to beat, you might bring those people in.
Yeah.
But there's nothing wrong with bringing out outside voices. The WA team this year had a coach for the first time ever, a 9th player who could step in and play if someone was sick, and it actually looked like we were going to for day one, but we didn't. And Queensland, obviously being the host state, had one this year who did need to step in when one of the players fell ill at night one.
Oh, no.
Yeah, Hayden Walduck only played day one, didn't even make it through dinner, went home really sick and not through any self-infliction. So he missed day 2, and the coach for the team stepped in and played his army for day 2.
Who was the coach?
Josh McGowan, who was actually on the stream with me for day 1.
Yeah.
So, when you've got that opportunity, that works really well. And because Josh was part of that process the whole time, he knew how the armies worked, he knew how the armies played. It might not have been his army, but he had an understanding of what it was intended to do. And then before the game, what we used to do, so say, for example, I had to play a Tyranid army.
Mm-hmm.
But we'd have a pool of, within the 8 of us, we'd break up all the codexes and go, cool, who's the most experienced with Tyranids? Oh, that's Tom. So at the start of, if I'm not familiar with them, I'd actually go to Tom at the start of before the game starting, like, Tom, what do I need to remember?
Yeah.
Even though I'm familiar with the army list, and we've all talked about it and workshopped it, and we know what we're dealing with, give me the 3 key points. What are the stratagems I need to look out for? What's the combo that I need to remember can happen? What's my target priority? It's one of those few events where you can get coaching before the game starts.
But only from your team members.
Yeah, and only before the game starts. Yeah. So we would grab 5 minutes as a team, get everyone together and go, cool, has anyone got any questions?
So this is interesting because earlier I was saying that the sooner you get your matchups done, the sooner you can start your game. So obviously, like, for example, you're the first person that gets put up. So being the first person that gets put up, you then want to go and get your game started straight away. Now, you can go to Tom and go, hey, help me out with what I need to do for this. But say, for example, you're the most experienced Eldar player on your team and Tom has to play against Eldar. You've already started your game, so he can't come up and ask you.
So that comes down to obviously a team synergy there, where if you have those conversations at the start of the matchup process, awesome. If, say, for example, I wanted to be the voice of Eldar, and someone else wasn't confident in playing them, you'd basically not start the game. As a team, you've got to have that synergy where you all work together and go, cool, this Eldar army is really complex. We need, as a team, whoever ends up playing them, we need to have
a couple of minutes to sit
the 8 of us need to get together and go, cool, do you remember what this does? Do you remember what this combo is? Do you remember how this works? This is the way that you beat it. This is the way it plays out. And that's obviously all on assumption, because how the opponent does it is another matter entirely.
Yeah, exactly. And just because that's how you would play it doesn't necessarily mean that's how they would play it. And over on the Patrons Only podcast, we've been going through the tournament prep guide. And one of the things that we talked about was how you can use a whiteboard to make sure that you remember kind of your order of process for your army. But I think that that's somewhere that a double-sided whiteboard could really come in handy, so that you're able to go, okay, quickly in 5 dot points or less, tell me what I need to remember about this, and being able to.
A lot of that's gone on the spreadsheet traditionally for us, where you finish the matchup process, everyone's told, do not go and start your game. And then everyone's gotten together and gone, cool, you're playing the Orc player. Do you remember that because this is pre-FAQ, they can mob up Mega Knobs? Do you remember that because this is pre-FAQ that this works? And look out for this psychic power and this unit. Remember that the Space Marines with the Ancient can do this when they die. Remember, da-da-da-da-da. And a lot of that will go on the spreadsheet as dot points for the key points of those armies.
Have you enough room on the dot points for that?
Oh, you would be amazed at how big and complex these spreadsheets are.
Well, I guess what I'm just thinking is, so you would have, this is,
so
for example, you've got your whole 216, 226.
Most of the time it's written on you'll get a printout. Like the year we went to ETC, we had a digital copy on my iPad, and everyone had digitals, but we also had a team bound hard copy, and every single one of those lists was written on with, these are the things to keep an eye on, this is some of the special rules that they have, this is what you need to watch out for.
I guess for me, I just think if I was able to just jot it down on the back of, on a whiteboard, it's there, rather than me having to flick through and be able to find it on this little spreadsheet with.
I suppose with the hard copy thing that we had, when we had finished the matchups and we'd all get together as the team, Diffie was actually handing us, like pulling them out of the binder and just going, here's who you're playing, here's the army list, and the dot points are on the bottom of it.
Awesome.
And that worked really well because we'd already.
I guess I wasn't necessarily thinking there'd be a page for each player. That makes a lot more sense. I was thinking you've got an Excel spreadsheet with all of the players, all on one sheet.
Oh, no.
Tiny little dot points. Thinking, no, that's not going to work for me. But no, you hand me an A4 bit of paper and I'm okay with that.
The matchup sheets will tend to be one per team on the Excel sheet. So if you're playing at the ETC, you'd have 28 sheets. And that would have the grid of the traffic light or whatever system you're using. It'd have a summary underneath it of all 8 lists in that team. So you'd have it listed as, for example, Drakari, Space Marines, GSC, Custodes, Blood Angels, Admech, Anari, and Tau as the 8 options, numbered 1 to 8 or whatever they were. And then down at the bottom, there'd be a summary that goes, okay, the GSC is a brigade, a battalion, and this many acolytes, this many neophytes, this many X, Y, and Zs. It wouldn't give the full army list, but it'd give you a snapshot
really
of
brief overview.
What you're looking at. And then, inevitably, if you needed those army lists, then there was another copy. So, but that's, again, it's how much prep work you can put into it. And inevitably, the captain always has to do that little bit more because they're the ones who tend to submit the army list. They're the ones who have to make sure everything's in the right format. They're the ones who are...
Making sure things are in the right format is a really... really important thing to do.
And even getting the team to check each other's army lists. There's nothing worse than getting an army list submitted and then no one bothers to look at it and then you're over points or under points. Or, you've used Battlescribe and Battlescribe's not accurate. Or, you've put an illegal option on there because Battlescribe says it's fine. And those things happen.
Or you're not completely familiar with that army because you don't normally play it.
Yes.
And, so you're filling this in and you didn't realise that an FAQ had come out to say that that wasn't okay anymore. Yeah.
So getting the team to vet the armies a few weeks out is always important. And then the captain needs to make sure that they're all in the format required for the event. Some of them don't care about Battlescribe. ETC is a big no-no. And they've got a very specific format with a breakup so you can check it easily. And those sorts of things, that's extra work that the captain needs to do because ultimately they're the ones who have to do all the submissions and everything. So it's all right to have a secretary for the team that can do all that. Look, some people love doing that data stuff and love doing the analytics of it. So if you've got a player on the team who loves doing that stuff, it makes sense to delegate, especially if they've got the time and the inclination. If they've got the inclination but no time, probably not worth doing it that way. But,
but I guess finding out how the team can share the load so not everything falls to the captain.
Well, again, when you're starting to analyse lists and what they do before people start doing the traffic lights, if you in the team go, cool, we've got 7 teams to look at, there's 8 of us.
Yeah.
You two do you do those 2 teams, you do those 2 teams, you do those 2 teams, you do those 2 teams. You mix it up so that everyone does 2 teams, even though you're doubling up.
Yeah.
It means that one person might go, oh, it's just a typical Elder Army. Oh no, in actual fact, it stacks leadership modifiers to -5, which was picked up by the other player.
Yeah.
So there's lots of that sort of stuff that you can do. So you can put an experienced player to look at those lists, but you can also put, by having 2 people with opposing army list experiences, you can kind of catch things.
Yeah.
So as you can tell from this hour-plus recording, there's so much that can be put into the back end of a team prep side of things.
Yeah.
And if we're going to travel to Tennessee in a year or two's time, then that's certainly some of the stuff we'll be looking at because, you're traveling a long way. You're putting a lot of commitment into this. And, you don't want to go over half-baked and kind of muddle through.
Yeah.
It's a show of respect for your opponents as well as anything else.
And know that,
give yourself the best shot at success.
We joke with Brett in a completely loving way, calling the ETC Nerd Olympics.
Yep.
And and it is, it is said with love and affection. But
there's that but again.
Yes, sorry, it is said with love and affection. And remember that when we, if we are going over to America or wherever, we are still representing Australia.
Yeah.
And representing the people who can get there. And whether that's, as singles when you guys all went over to LVO, you were going over as 10 singles, and yet it was an Australian team going over there. There were however many Australian players watching and cheering you on from their computer screens. So it's the same when WA has just been over to Queensland representing Western Australia.
Yeah.
So you want to do the best you possibly can for yourself, for your team, and for whoever it is that you're representing.
Yeah.
When we've got the WATC coming up, where I think we've got some interest on some interstate players coming over, which is fantastic. We also have teams that are representing local clubs.
Yes.
Crags is
Gaming
putting in
groups.
teams. Obsec is putting in Obsec, but that's not who I meant. I meant Outpost. Then you've got Toy Soldier Cartel and Tabletop Mafia, and there's different groups that put together that are representing their group or representing their club or their organisation. You want to do the best you possibly can.
Yep.
As well as having fun and remembering that it's just a game. And we're not actually playing for Olympic medals.
No. But you do get some good stuff some cool stuff when you do get those prizes. And if you don't, it doesn't matter.
No.
I mean,
cool stuff is the game you get to play.
Absolutely. I met some wonderful people at LVI. I met some fabulous people at ETC. And some of the guys who I haven't seen in a couple of years now through the ANZ TC are still very close friends of mine.
Yeah.
So...
and we haven't organised it because we haven't thought that far, but, being able to go out and have dinner on a 2-day event, going out on the Saturday night and creating...
As a community,
yeah. And hopefully we'll do that first show as well, go out on the Saturday and Sunday night in between, so...
And, if we do make it to Tennessee and we say to Chad, hey, there's going to be 2 teams of 5 from Australia coming, can you hook us up with some teams who will take us out and show us where to go and have some fun, then I'm sure that from all the Americans that I've met playing 40K, they'll all be more than happy to take a bunch of rambling Aussies out to show them around and have a good time and sort of bond and, become part of that community. And that's what it's all about.
And if you're listening to this, we're actually not really all that interested in sheep stations.
Speak for yourself. I had a board game about that.
Really? You want to go out and visit sheep stations if we go to Tennessee?
No, not at all.
No. Awesome. Cattle stations.
I'm liking the idea of the whiskey side of things that goes with Tennessee.
I will admit that did excite me too.
Anyway, that's a whole bunch of stuff around putting teams together. And
there really is so much we could talk about with team events, and we've only really scratched the surface.
The matchup process alone has so much variation and dynamics in it, and thought that can go into it to get the best possible chance of winning a round.
Well, there's the matchup process. There's the process that goes
Even writing
into
armies.
That's what I was about to say. There's the process that goes into deciding who plays what armies, then writing the army lists, and how you look at the armies. Because, as I said, a lot of times at the moment, people take multiple factions within one army list. You're trying to go for single factions or two factions in order to share the love around, and there's so much that goes into that we could talk about and delve into. And I suppose in the lead up to WATC, we might do a bit more of that.
Well, the next episode,
people are interested in listening to it.
Yeah. Well, the next episode is going to be recorded live at show. So maybe the one after that. But we'll take
we are recording the next episode, and I will tell you about that in the outro.
Yeah. I've just stopped myself.
Yeah.
All right, we'll take a break and we'll wrap up the episode. So now we're back. Now we can talk about what's going to be recorded at show and how the next couple of podcasts are going to go. Because I stopped myself and then you put your foot straight back in it.
I didn't put my foot in it.
You started to.
I was just having a natural conversation with you.
I know. And I caught myself when I started and stopped. So,
okay.
Yeah, so the next episode 43, will be a live, not live, but it'll be recorded at show.
Yes. So
with guests who want to come and talk to us.
Or who have questions that want to ask as part of that. So we're recording that on Sunday at 2nd of June at 2:30. That starts.
Yep. So if you're wanting to come over and chat to us about anything in particular, we're going to be covering what's happened on the first day. We're going to be talking about what we've seen on the second day, what's coming for the third day. We're going to be interviewing whoever we can lay our hands on. And if you want to come and ask questions and say hi, you can join us for a couple of minutes and chat to us for the recording. Yeah,
if you have any PC, PG questions, then feel free to come and ask those. If not, we will cut that bit out.
Yeah, we are going to try and maintain our PG rating within iTunes and so on. So please bear that in mind if you possibly can.
I haven't told Mike this yet, but...
Of course not.
Yeah. So we've been, obviously, we have a bar at Southern Hemisphere Open.
Yep.
And so we've just been, the kids and I have been trying to work out what we're going to call the bar.
I still like Warhammered.
Yeah. So, I've come up with a couple of different solutions. And our son writes jingles. So I'm going to get him to write a jingle for it, and then we're going to put that out as well as a little advertising thing. So that's coming up as well. We'll be recording that in the next couple of days.
I still want to do my rewrite of, I don't know the artist name, but the song Shotgun.
I did know that.
I don't know, but I've got a half of it sort of etched out in my head late at night. So, and if I can get the lyrics to work, I am going to record that with like a karaoke.
Ezra.
I'm going to find the karaoke version with no lyrics, and I'm going to try and record that with me singing.
Oh, God.
I think that'll be amazingly funny.
Oh, I'm really sorry.
Then straight after show on the Wednesday, after we've done Bump Out on the Tuesday, we're going to have a live on the Wednesday night.
Yes.
We're going to look like we've been dragged through a hedge backwards and
yes.
whatnot, but hopefully slightly relieved. Tired but relieved is the goal I'm looking for that Wednesday night.
Okay.
Then
rather than crestfallen and...
Yep. Then the recordings we do on the weekend will come out the following week.
Yes.
Then we might look at...
and we've been
2 weeks post that, looking at releasing another episode covering some of the real matchup stuff for team events.
We've been really prepared already, so the Patrons Only podcast has been...
That's all scheduled for Saturday.
Pre-recorded, edited and scheduled already, so we're on it.
So I can't forget that.
So that's awesome. It's just the 9 million other things that we can forget. So should we give a quick wrap-up of what's happening at show?
If you want to.
Okay. Go for it. Okay, so we've got, I believe, 20-something different tournaments over 16 different game systems. You can still buy tickets. Please buy tickets. We would like as many people there as physically possible, and ways that you can help. Obviously, people are helping by coming and helping doing Bump In and Bump Out, And, actually we've got people helping on the door. We've got people helping in the OBSEC booth.
Yeah, we've definitely
runners
we've got volunteers happening this year, which is amazing.
Yeah, it's awesome. Still happy to have more volunteers. We've got, but ways that people can help. Invite your friends to like the Objective Secured Facebook page. Invite them to the Southern Hemisphere Open event. Share the event. Share any promotional posts that we see. Tag friends in it. Invite I think Dan said, invite family, friends, neighbours, co-workers, anyone really. Tell them to come along. That will be fantastic. So, we've got a whole heap of different formal events happening for tabletop gaming, and we would like to see as many people there as physically possible over the 3 days. And then we have got a painting competition happening on the Saturday that's being judged by Dean Lecoq, who is multiple Golden Demon winner.
Yes, he is now.
Gillen is judging that as well, and I think Stu is
I think Stu's the third
judge for that. So they come with a lot of experience in painting and judging. So we're really lucky to have those, and I really appreciate it, because otherwise it would be me doing it, and I don't feel confident to do that. So I appreciate that. So the painting competition is $2. Bring your entry with your $2 on the day. Cash is appreciated. And then we fill out all the forms and put them in. There are, I believe, 13 different categories.
And SMS Paints are sending us a whole bunch of stuff as sponsorship for those categories.
Awesome. Then we have got painting workshops, which are absolutely fantastic. There's a whole heap of painting workshops, and we really want to see as many of those full as possible. But having said that, they're small classes.
I suppose they're hobby workshops now, because we've got the green stuff component, and we've got a whole bunch on terrain, how to build your custom terrain, how to paint and build Games Workshop terrain.
And also the one that Troy and Charlie,
we've also got our first, our first cosplay.
Yeah, from
workshop.
Play by Proxy, they're running that. We did a whole episode on the workshops in our last episode.
Episode 41, if you're looking for it.
Check those out, because we've got those happening. Role-playing games, we've got 20 different DMs or GMs who are doing 80 different games, including there's a competitive RPG happening this year as well. So that's pretty awesome.
There's a couple of articles of them on the website.
There's 2 interview with the DM up, one with Hannah, Ashley, and one with Will, what is Will's last name? William someone, that's name I can't remember off the top of my head, and I'm so sorry for that, William. But those 2 are up on the podcast. They're up on the Facebook page as well. No, they're not. Well, they are, and also on the website. William Bampton. So they're up.
There's also links to those on the Facebook page and Twitter if you want to follow those through.
What else have we got? There's a whole heap of board games there you can come and try out. Drinking is not the purpose of the event, but there is a bar there. There's a licensed area within the venue, and there will be the majority of the venue will be unlicensed. However, there will be a licensed component. It's about half and half, really. There are retailers there, so I should not list them because I'll forget some. Tactics are going to be there. Amazing Forge, OTP, Alpha Strike, Little Robot. We did have a list. Smaller. We've got a few Artist Alley people will be there as well. Clubs are coming along, so Outpost will be there, Crags will be there, I'd Crit that will be there, Rockingham Historical Gamers, NWS, Perth Nerd Herd. You forgot Games Workshop in that spiel of vendors. Games Workshop will be there in the vendors as well as running a whole heap of our workshops. And all of those retailers will have space for put stuff on display, for demos. The clubs have all got plenty of space for demo games. We've got some independent people coming along who will be doing intro and demo games as well. LARP West are also going to be coming along. So they're going to have a space where you can jump in and, they'll run you through a very basic how to swing a weapon safely. Combat thing for LARPing. Yeah. So if you've ever felt the inclination to try it, there is actually going to be an opportunity for a very limited number of people to try it, because it's my understanding that it's going to be fairly limited spots across the days. Well, I guess the limitation is that they've got a 20-metre space and only a couple of people at the LARP booth. Yeah. So you kind of... It's also quite tiring. I mean, if you were stood there swinging a sword for 8 hours across the day, that'd wear you out. Beats going to the gym. Oh. Yep. So yeah, they're going to be there. I'm probably forgetting things. Little Robot will be doing some Gundam workshops.
Yep, Gunpla, beginners and
workshops.
advanced.
They're going to have a Gundam work competition.
LRC is coming this year, yes, which is
as well
attached to Bandai, which with once we know more about Games Workshop's relationship with Bandai going forward, could be really exciting for next year's show.
Mm-hmm.
There's a whole heap going on. You can check out the full schedule and everything that's been planned along.
Panels, we've got, Q&A panels with painting panels over. So Dean, Gillen, Stu, and for one of the days, Shane, have a very small break between workshops. They're going to come and do a Q&A panel on what judges look for in painting competitions, and there's an Ask Dean Anything Within Reason panel. And so there's that happening, plus George, Mike and Steve are doing a panel on terrain. You and I are doing the podcast live. Dungeons and Drongos are doing a live RPG. There's lots of stuff happening.
Jump on the objectivesecure.com.au. There's a big sign there that says Southern Hemisphere Open 2019 event page. There's also on the sidebar, there's a full event info link for very top of the side info bar.
Mm-hmm.
They will both take you through to the separate website, which you can then jump on, see everything that's going on. There's big green buttons everywhere that say get tickets.
Yeah, please get some tickets.
And
buy them for your friends, family. Bring your nan. She might love Harry Potter roleplay.
Who knows? Are we having My Little Pony this year? Have you seen that on the schedule?
I can't remember off the top of my head.
I know there was talk about it. I'm not going to promise it, but I remember there being talk about it.
You and I talked about it when we were out there at a store and
I
we saw
remember,
the
yes.
My Little Pony thing and
Yep.
remembered that Matt had run that.
Yep, I remember now.
So.
Anyway.
But I know that Legend of the Five Rings is happening because Will's running that. I know that Hannah's running about 9 different RPGs, and one of them is the Harry Potter, I think it's called Broomsticks RPG, plus she does a whole heap of like the Honey Heist and Lady Blackbird and those kinds of smaller. Dungeons and Doggies is another one that she's doing, which is like Dungeons and Dragons, but everyone's
a dog.
Plays a dog.
Oh, God.
Which is really cool. And I know when she ran things last year, I believe there was like, it was.
Do you know the one I want to play?
LARP, but they have like props and hats and things like that.
The one I want to play is called Crash Pandas.
Okay.
It's a game about raccoons entering the world of illegal street racing in LA. It's literally raccoons and Fast and Furious smashed together.
Of course.
That sounds amazing to me. I really love the idea of that.
I like the sound of Pride and Extreme Prejudice.
Yeah, look, robots and regent ladies, that works.
Yeah. But there's...
I'm trying to figure out what Vin Diesel would be in that.
In the raccoons?
Yeah.
Well, I guess he'd be a raccoon.
But he's bald.
True.
That'd be a weird-looking raccoon.
Yeah.
And then you get The Rock.
See, now I've got like
and Jason Statham. There's a lot of bald people in that
of,
series.
The Friar Tuck from the 1970s-something...
yeah.
Robin
Hood
cartoon. Anyway, so yeah, there's so much stuff happening. So please come, tell your friends, tell your neighbours, tell your sisters, brothers, husbands, wives, girlfriends, niece.
Look, school groups. We've had contact from a few different groups of homeschool for school groups. We look forward to seeing you there for the weekend.
Mm-hmm.
We will be there for 5 days.
We have Bodhi who's going to be doing intro hammer, I've decided to call it just now.
Oh, okay.
Which is, a very simplified version of Warhammer 40k or AOS for kids who are just getting into it. So, yeah, lots of things for lots of people.
Awesome. All right. Well,
before I think of anything else to talk about for show,
yep, I'm ending it.
The plan.
Thank you.
Please come.
Thank you very much for joining us for this episode, the last one before show. We will see you at show for the recording for the next one.
Yes, if you see us, come and say hello.
Yep. We're going to be in bright red, I think, this year, aren't we?
We've got red and orange.
Yeah, so you're not going to be able to hopefully miss us too much.
Yeah.
Hopefully this year we're going to be less stressed out than we have been the last 2 years, but I can't see that being a pattern that we'll embrace because something inevitably will change.
Yeah. People are going to come out and help us set up and on the Friday and pack up on the Tuesday, which is fantastic. Please don't come if you just want to chat to us because we don't have capacity to talk to you during bump in and bump out. And so if you just come and have a chat with Michael, I will do my nana. So please don't do that.
Since I have to stay with her that night, please don't.
Yeah, please don't do that. However, Saturday, Sunday, Monday, please come and say hello.
Yes.
So, yeah, we will be there. We've got, obviously, the Objective Secured shirts on that we'll be wearing, walking around, and our faces are plastered all over Facebook. So hopefully you know what we look like.
Yep. All right, we're done. Thank you very much for listening. We will see you in the next episode.
Or at Southern Hemisphere Open.
That is true.
So happy gaming, everyone.
You've been listening to the Objective Secured podcast. If you'd like to get in touch, you can visit our website, objectivesecured.com.au. You can find us on Facebook, Facebook/Objective Secured, or you can email us, obsec@optusnet.com.au. Thanks for listening.